Well, there are a whole bunch of questions concerning that. Whether you can actually remove the material from the tank in the first place. That's the first question, whether you can get it out of the tank. And this kind of tank, which is sort of a one-of-a-kind tank, we're not sure that one has the technology to do that. But then if you got it out of the tank, is it possible to solidify the material as the technology exists? And we feel that one should take the most promising technology available. We think it's absolutely essential that you remove the material as soon as possible from the tank and solidify it with the best available technology. And we feel the best available technology is one that they've used at Idaho for some time, called calcination, roasting the material. The Department of Energy would like to make it into a glass, and we don't feel the technology is available to do that. We're concerned about that process. It's a higher temperature process. We're concerned that more material will be boiled off and get into the environment. We're also concerned that they are going to use the present reprocessing plant to do that operation, and where the worker exposures have been so high. We'd like them to build a separate building for the entire operation.
Do we have the know-how today, the technology, for the solidification of the high liquid waste?
The problem is, as you stated, to render the liquid wastes into a more manageable form. Highly radioactive material is at its most unmanageable when it's liquid. So the problem is, the program must be to render those into some more manageable form. In this country, there are various programs operated by the federal government for solidifying high-level liquid wastes. I have personally traveled to Idaho and to the state of Washington and personally examined processes there for vitrifying or solidifying very, very similar liquid wastes from a liquid to a solid form. Once the liquid is in a solid form, it is more easily transportable. It is more easily isolated in a secure isolation kind of a facility. And in Europe as well, there is reprocessing of and solidification of high-level liquid waste. So there are a number of ways to do what has to be done to those liquid wastes.
I believe the technology, there is reasonable technology that can be applied to the solidification of the waste. A major point of the discussion that seems to go on is not whether one has the technology to do it, but should you develop improved technology? And at what point should you stop developing or looking for improvements and get on with actually doing the job?
In other words, this is more of an experimental, this is more or less an experimental process, isn't it?
Well, it depends on how you define experimental. If you're talking about real basic experimental, I would dispute that. It's certainly experimental from the standpoint that it's not the type of thing that's being done on this scale on a day-to-day basis. However, the principles that are involved are fairly well known, so I don't put it into what I would classify as you know, developing brand new experimental technology that one has to wonder if it's really ever going to work at all. I don't think there's any question about that.
This is a schematic of a solidification project that is going on in the western part of the country. And it shows that the process of taking liquid, the chemical liquid, through a calcination process and then a solidification process is a relatively simple process. What complicates it for nuclear radioactive materials is that the boiling off and the reduction in volume of the materials requires some very elaborate what they call off-gas systems. You simply can't boil this stuff and let the steam go into the environment. So there's a lot of steps involved in protecting the escape of any of the materials. But what you wind up with is you reduce a liquid to a form of glass. This is the non-radioactive version of that glass. And once you have it in the gaseous form, it's far more manageable, far easier to use. These processes exist now. They're being done in laboratory settings, and the wastes at West Valley are not appreciably different from wastes now being solidified. And in fact, as much waste as there is at West Valley has already been solidified elsewhere in the country.
It's questionable as to whether they can do this now. Right now it's been done on a laboratory scale. It's never been done on a large scale. The Department of Energy's primary option for doing the work at here seems to be glassification. They want to use this as an experimental facility to see if this actually does work, so then they can go to the millions of gallons of high-level waste they have at the weapons plant and glassify them potentially if it does work.
What about the sludge in the bottom of this tank? Do we know the chemical or physical makeup of this sludge?
No, there hasn't been a test. There has been no test of the sludge, and they have to design equipment that can test the sludge. That hasn't been done yet. They don't know whether it's, you know, just sort of muddy, or whether it's hard like cement. You know, the physical composition, they don't even know that.
In other words, they're experimenting in this so-called 10-year plan to clean up this area.
Yes, they're experimenting with this, and if the methods work, then they'll use them at some of the government facilities.
I understand there are about 120,000 gallons of sludge at the bottom of this tank. What happens when the liquid is removed from the sludge? Will it create any dangerous radiation or overheating of any kind?
Well, there is work underway now that's examining within the tank what the nature is of the liquid, and there's some concern that the mixture has thickened at the bottom. However, there is at least one place in this country where they've developed a successful technique for extracting the heavier sludge from a tank and bringing it over to a glassification process. My examination of these matters, and I'm trained as a lawyer, not as a scientist or an engineer, is that the mechanical ability to remove these materials from the tank and put them into a glassification or a solidification processing facility does exist. It's expensive, it's difficult, but it can be done, and the federal government, in fact, does it now at defense facilities.
Okay, so we take out the liquid and we get out the sludge. Where do we bury it?
That is a question for West Valley as it is for the entire country. There is not now operating anywhere in this country a waste repository program.
I'll tell you one of our biggest fears is that what they're going to do is they're going to come on here with a solidification method. The solidification method is not going to, the solidified wastes are not going to be compatible with the repository they decide to put them in. You know, in which case, then even if they do have a permanent repository, we may be stuck. So that's why we're worried about the glassified waste. One of the reasons is that glassified waste won't work in a salt repository. And they're studying salt repositories as their primary option.
But salt cracks, so that...
Salt cracks the glass. Salt erodes it away, right. So if they do come up with a salt repository as their permanent option, and we have these big blocks of radioactive glass here, we have no place to put them. Okay, that's one of the reasons that the groups I work with, the Coalition on West Valley Nuclear Waste, has been pushing to have these wastes calcined rather than glassified at this time.
The townspeople have plenty of opinions on the NFS plant. Some folks don't like it and never have. Others have faith in the facility. Safety is a big concern. But there's another side to the story, the economic factor. NFS now foots a pretty big tax bill that helps keep the community going. All of that ends if the company pulls out. What is the general consensus of your parishioners over this NFS flap?
I think there are some who are dead set against anything there. They want it cleaned up, decommissioned. There are others who are in the middle, don't care one way or the other. There are others who would like to see the thing operating and viable again. And I don't think at least from the feedback I get, there is a consensus that you could say that our parishioners are one way or the other, as a majority.
How will you be hurt economically if the plant stays closed?
Well, according to the contract, if and when Nuclear Fuels abandons the site, I use that in quotation marks, the tax base will be very seriously injured in the community, that is in the town of Ashford and in the school district. To the point, well, there are various figures, I can't recall them right offhand, somewhere around 30–35% of our tax base will disappear. And of course, this is going to make it very difficult on the remaining people unless somebody takes up the slack.
What is your greatest worry here?
Well, I guess at the present time is the economic factor that might result in the economic burdens to the community should we be faced with the total loss of the facility.
What is your greatest worry here at West Valley?
I'm concerned about two things, and my posture and the board's posture has been we're concerned with the safety of our students. Another concern that the board has and that I have and many of our people have has to do with the tax structure. Now, last year we received $79,484 from the Nuclear Fuels tax rate. They presently pay 16.4% of our tax. If NFS leaves, and when NFS leaves, we're not clear as to whether the state of New York or the federal government is going to subsidize us to any degree. So beyond the safety issue, we're also concerned with the dollars.
Many feel there's a great danger here. What is your feeling?
Well, the danger may exist, but as of right now, I have never seen any evidence that the danger does exist. There's dangers all around us, but if it's seems to be monitored properly, it seems to have the proper supervision, and so far I haven't seen personally any evidence of any danger that would excite me.
Well, I don't think there's any question that there may be, you know, a hazard. There may be a danger with it. The track record of the company seems to be relatively clean. I can see the plant from my bathroom window every morning. I haven't lost any sleep over it.
Are you aware of any specific hazards out here?
This is, I mean, I don't know whether we're aware of specific hazards. I mean, we feel if something should ever go wrong with this plant, we would definitely have health hazards. I mean, we know enough about radiation that we realize it's going to affect us, but we don't know if or when or how something's going to happen to this plant. I mean, we don't know what they would tell us if we did complain.
Do you have any kind of a contingency plan to get out of here?
How do we, I mean, by the time, I mean, the proximity of our operation with the plant is so close that by the time something did happen, I doubt if we'd even have time to get out. I mean, within a mile, I mean, how would you, by the time you left, you'd probably be contaminated anyway. You might better sit tight and not contaminate somebody else.
Are you aware of any health hazards, or anyone being ill, or any herds being affected?
Well, there were times when some farmers felt maybe that they had breeding problems because of it, but there's no way that you can say that stock is affected by it, because unlike Love Canal and dioxin, you can't put your finger on anything. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it or see it.
Would you like to see the plant reopened in any particular capacity?
That's a hard question to answer. Of course, I'd like to, economically, I'd like to see the plant reopened. I think it would generate monies into our area that aren't here now or aren't available now. Of course, it would affect everybody in the area. But the prime concern and I think it's on everybody's mind, is the safety of it. If it could be operated in a safe manner with the assurance that it is going to be safe, yes, I'd really like to see it open up again.
Would you like to see the plant reopened in any particular capacity?
I have my own personal feeling that this country needs nuclear power. I'm against nuclear waste. I'm for nuclear power, but unfortunately you can't have it both ways. There's a tremendous investment, and as a taxpayer I'm concerned with what goes on out there. If it can be reopened, if they can maintain safety, if we can maintain our tax base, that's the best of all possible worlds.
What would your feeling be if a permanent nuclear garbage dump site is created here?
If it were monitored, and if there were if there was no danger, I would have no objections.
I think it would devastate the whole area as far as people would be, just the opinions of people would be so that there'd be ill feelings in the community, I think, because there's so many people on both sides of the fence. And myself personally, although we just can't pick up and move, it would scare me.
Why do you stay here?
Where else do we go? You can't just pick up and go purchase property someplace else. Everything's so expensive now. If you've got your house paid for, you feel that that's where you've got to stay.
How would you feel if they made nuclear fuel systems a national dumping ground for nuclear garbage?
Well, I feel that I would get out of here just as fast as I could get. I mean, we're thinking now of even buying land somewhere else to get away from this place.
Is there a deal between the state and the federal government whereby Uncle Sam would clean up this mess in return for having West Valley as a permanent burial ground for this nuclear garbage?
Well, there was talk of that last year. My thinking now is that there is no deal and there's no conversations going on between Albany and Washington that would push such an arrangement. But there were definite conversations a year ago between then Secretary Schlesinger and our Energy Commissioner Jim LaRocca that would have done just that, that would have said the federal government would pick up the tremendous cost, some people say as much as $1 billion, of the decontamination of the nuclear waste at West Valley, a federal expense then, if the federal government, and this was a trade-off, could use the already contaminated ground of West Valley as an AFR, an away from reactor storage site for nuclear waste for the whole Northeast. And through some negotiations and some hearings and some legislation, that was busted. So I think that the state has made great progress in the last year.
Whatever happened to your earlier announced agreement in principle whereby the state would make a deal with the federal government would pay for the operation, and in return allow them to bring in nuclear waste to West Valley on a permanent basis? That was never a deal such as you've just described. What there was an agreement by the federal government to assume a major responsibility for cleaning up West Valley. And that responsibility is now being perfected and is the subject of an amendment in the Congress and so forth. That was the agreement. In making that agreement, the federal government said, at the same time, we would ask the state of New York to consider two possibilities. One, the use of the spent fuel storage pool, and two, the use of the low-level burial ground. Since that time, the federal government has expressed that it has very little or no interest in the spent fuel storage pool. It is too small, and it is too complicated by these other problems out there. And with regard to the low-level burial ground, the federal government continues to say to the state of New York, you're producing an awful lot of nuclear waste for medicine and nuclear power and other programs. The place you send it, Barnwell, South Carolina, is going to be closing itself to you over the next couple of years, that you, the state of New York, ought to be looking at West Valley as a possibility for dealing with this problem of low-level waste, which is going to be there no matter what. That was not
a position of the federal government of coercion or of quid pro quo. There were letters exchanged this summer with Secretary Schlesinger and then the new Secretary, Secretary Duncan, in which they make it perfectly clear that their commitment to participate as the major responsible party for the cleanup of the high-level liquid waste is not conditioned upon our participation in any other program or our acceptance of any other waste. We are under no such obligation.
Who do you feel is responsible for the cleanup?
Well, we think there's a shared responsibility. The state right now is asking the federal government to handle the cleanup task and to pay the bill. The federal government is really all of us, so we're all going to have to pay for that cleanup. I mean, we're either going to pay if we're the state, or we're going to pay if we're the federal government. We think Getty Oil has a responsibility too. We don't think the site has been left in good condition as required by their contract.
What is the responsibility of New York State for cleaning up NFS?
Well, the responsibility becomes New York State's under a contract which was signed in the early 60s between then Governor Rockefeller and Nuclear Fuel Services. It means that at the last day of this year, it all accrues to the state, buildings and the residue, meaning the waste and all of that. And my own personal opinion is that that will never happen. The contract will go into effect, but the recent decision by the Department of Energy and the appropriation which is working itself through Congress means to me that the federal government is finally realizing that that if ever there was a role for federal policy, it's with nuclear waste and it's with radioactive problems and so on. So I think they will come in and be responsible for a certain portion of this waste. And I think that the contract, again, has some language in it. For instance, it says that the state can refuse to accept all that's there unless it is in good condition. And so I think that Commissioner LaRocca has some good legal arguing points if what is turned over is not in good condition. And there's some evidence now that that's the case.
What happens to the good condition clause signed by NFS? Will they be held responsible for leaving the facility the way it was when they got there?
Well, the nature of the agreements between the state and NFS is very, very complex. And the nature of their termination of any lease or obligations is very complex. They are there under a lease which expires at the end of 1980. And by operation of the lease, at the end of their term, they are entitled to turn the facility over to the state of New York or to the research authority. However, before they can do that, they must conform with very detailed, defined conditions that in sum amount to good condition of the facility. In my view, they are not able to do that because they have not performed all of their tasks under the agreements. For example, the level of contamination or radioactivity within the facility has not been brought down to the level that the agreements require before they can depart. They are obliged under the agreements to decontaminate and decommission the reprocessing plant to a condition consistent with industrial practice. They have not done that, and nor are they prepared to do it. So there are a number of things that they have not yet performed which will prevent their meeting the good condition requirement.
As the landlord, what happens to the lease at the end of the year?
Well, we're not going to permit this operator to leave without conforming and complying with every one of their obligations under the law and under the agreements. And I think we'll have the support of the federal government in that regard as well. The federal government expects that these operators will perform as they've been obliged to perform. The lease can be extended, carried over so long as they are in tenancy, while they attempt to meet their obligations.
What do you feel is the solution to the problem here?
Close it up, keep it closed, and do everything possible to decontaminate or decommission the plant in the safest possible manner there is, regardless of cost?
Well, I would like to see the liquid waste solidified, removed, disposed of, and I would like to see it, of course my personal opinion, opened as a medical dumping site for medical waste in the northeast part of the United States.
I would say get rid of the high-level waste by whatever technical means they come to. I think it needs a great deal of study as to whether the plant ever operates reprocessing again. I have a fear from some of the things I read that regardless of what the emotions are, I think we're going to have to go with nuclear power in the near future as a stopgap, not for the long haul, but in the near future.
I think the immediate solution to the problem, because most people are concerned about the liquid waste at West Valley, is to solidify the waste. And that eliminates, or apparently eliminates, their concern about the fact that the material can get out, although an escape into the environment. There's been a lot of studies that indicate that that's not true, and the fact that the liquid waste being there is quite safe, and people who are knowledgeable in this area and have really taken the time to really evaluate what the hazards are, you'd find would have no problem pitching a tent alongside the high-level waste tanks and accepting them as is. However, to be in conformity with current regulations, I don't think there's any question that the material should be solidified. And once the material is solidified, then there would be a separate determination as to where that material would be stored ad infinitum.
I think it hasn't been handled well in the past. Promises have been made that haven't been fulfilled. You know, levels of radiation that got into the environment never should have happened. Worker exposures never should have happened. And now a mess has been left on the site. You know, for 6 years operation, a mess has been left on the site that will last forever. And I don't know if you know, that's what nuclear power has in store for us, but I think that problem has to be, the situation has to be cleaned up.
In our two-part series on West Valley, we've tried to outline a clear picture of the nuclear waste facility and the problems it's facing. But the story is far from over. Some very important decisions will have to be made as to the future of the site, decisions that affect the lives of countless Western New Yorkers. A public hearing is to be held in West Valley tomorrow. It's part of the effort by the state to learn everyone's opinion. Whatever the outcome, we hope it will lead to a solid, safe solution to West Valley, the deadly dilemma.
Clerk will report the title of the Senate bill.
Senate 2443, an act to authorize the Department of Energy to carry out a high-level liquid nuclear waste management demonstration project at the Western New York Service Center in West Valley, New York.
Wait is finally over here at West Valley, and many hope it is the beginning of the end of the long and sometimes bitter controversy surrounding the nuclear waste cleanup. I'm Fran Lucca. On Channel 17 Reports this week, we'll examine the historic cleanup agreement just completed between the federal government and the state. We'll also hear of the potential dangers, the fears, and the skepticism over whether we have the technology to do the job. We'll also question whether this time bomb here at West Valley will finally be defused.
Or will there be a point in time when nuclear garbage may make its way back here once again?
The agreement provides for a 90-10 split in financial responsibility between the federal government and the state of New York, and overall management responsibility